Maria Ali, your host of Living 365 Today. It's time to stop waiting and start living 365. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for watching so far. The response to our previous episodes has been fantastic, and we really appreciate your viewership. We hope that the shows that you've seen have been helpful to you and helping you enhance your life. Just to let you know a little bit about 365 and where it all came about, it came about when I was turning 39 years old a few years back, and I wanted to celebrate my birthday. Really love celebrating my birthday. And I figured, geez, 39 is not a milestone birthday, typically speaking. 40 is the big one. And I didn't want to wait till 40. That's just kind of girl I am. And so I thought, well, how can I start by celebrating this as soon as possible? And I thought, well, maybe I will start in the year of my 40th birthday. My birthday happens to fall near the end of September. And I thought, well, maybe that following January I could celebrate my birthday for the year of my 40th. And even that didn't satisfy me. I realized I really wanted to start sooner than that. So I decided to start counting down my birthday from my 39th birthday to the 40th. And that became the beginning of 365. As I started to go through each day, really paying attention to doing things I wanted to do and say things I wanted to say, stop doing things I was doing that I didn't want to do, and maybe just saying things to people that didn't really fit right with me, I realized that I was living this life differently. I was living my life differently by living each day kind of as though it were my last. And even beyond that, making sure it was the best day I could ever have, just in case I didn't get another one. It's kind of similar to a bucket list in a way. It's sort of how it started out, but it just became that every day was a bucket list for me, and I began searching for the best ways to live my life each day. And as I got sort of halfway through it, I realized it was just totally changing my life, and I wanted to share that with other people. And that's when I birthed 365, just sharing with people how to stop waiting and start living. So often we're waiting for something, whether it be that perfect soulmate of ours, whether it be when we have enough money to do the things we want to do, whether it be when the kids grow up, whether it be when we feel like we've got perfect health or it's the perfect timing. One of the things we don't know is how much timing is left. And that's why I'm encouraging you all to stop waiting and start living 365. This show is designed to bring real experts and real tools to real people like you. And one of the things I really pride myself on in my coaching is sharing from my personal experiences to let you know, the people that I coach or the people that I'm trying to help, that just like you, we all have our issues. I have my issues too. And one of the things that's been coming through my office quite a bit lately has been around abuse. And it's something that I decided I would take time and have a show about, because I too, like clients who have been passing through my office, have suffered abuse throughout my life. It started with physical abuse in my childhood, as well as sexual abuse as a teen and in my early adulthood. And what's really sparked me to have this show today was a client that was in my office about a week ago. And for us to discuss the situation on hand for him and what was going on in his life, he'd probably be in about his mid-40s at this point in time. And one of the things I do is look to trace back where things had started, where these patterns have started, patterns of abuse. And it came back to talking about when he was a young child. He was about the age of 12, and his father wanted him to participate in a sporting activity on a regular basis. And when he decided that he didn't want to do so and articulated this to his father punched him in the stomach. Really sad for me to hear. But what saddened me more was that when I asked him if he had been abused, he said, well, that wasn't abuse, I was just being punished. And he didn't realize that that was abuse. And that's one of the reasons as well as that I want to do this show today, is because for myself as well as many others who have suffered at the hands of abuse, whether it be physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, oftentimes we don't even know that it's happening. Unless somebody's identified it and described it to you and told you that that is abuse, you may not even know that you suffered abuse. And it's one of those things where once it kind of comes into your energy and comes into your life, it's something that you can continue to attract whether you want it or not, which we all know you don't want. But it will continue to attract into your life in different areas. Even if it's not in the same capacity that it occurred at the beginning for you, it will continue to occur. So I really wanted to just let you know that abuse is anything that doesn't feel good. You tend to know when it's abusive. And it's not just about, I'm not talking about when people do things that you don't like or they kind of tick you off, but it's the type of thing where when someone hurts your physical body, that is definitely abuse. When someone does something to you sexually that you're not a willing participant in, and you've articulated that you don't want to be, or maybe even you haven't articulated it, that is also abuse. Because you can tell when someone knows that you don't want to engage in something. And emotionally, which is one that has become a lot more rampant these days, is emotional abuse. And that's when someone that just keeps totally telling you that you're no good, or putting you down in other ways, or playing head games with you and manipulating you in certain ways, that is a form of emotional abuse. Now, what do we do about that when we are being abused? What if it's our fault? How do we know it's abuse? Because that's something that I experienced myself firsthand, was not even knowing that I was abused, much like my client the other day. And my abuse was the one that I'm referring to right now is actually sexual abuse. And I didn't really know that it was would be considered sexual abuse, because I sort of thought, well, I tried to say no, and maybe I didn't say no forcefully enough, and that's why it happened. But it is still something where I thought it was maybe not abuse. And it actually took me into my 30s, because this happened when I was a teenager. It took me up until my 30s to actually seek counseling through an employee assistance program that I was fortunate to receive benefits for at one of my jobs, to talk to a counselor and actually, I remember asking the question, so I was abused, right? Like, that's actual sexual abuse. Because there was a part of me that wasn't sure. And oftentimes it's because we don't know. We don't know what is that fine line that gets crossed. But generally speaking, as I said to you before, anything that doesn't feel good, anything that seems to be against your will, whether you've articulated in some way, or you've tried through your body language, or you've tried pushing someone off, or you've even kind of, as you're kind of snickering or laughing, said, no thanks, I don't want that, and they don't seem to take no for an answer, that is abuse. And it can, as I said, be something that will continue to follow you if you're not able to recognize it. And what that can tend to come from is from not having clear boundaries. And I don't want to get into a place of blaming my parents, because they're lovely people who most definitely raised me to the best of their ability with the social upbringing that they had, with the cultural upbringing that they had, and with the values that were instilled in them, as well as what was taught to them and shown to them. So while I tell you this for an example, and I almost feel a need to say, if for some reason my parents do watch this is certainly not their fault, but it was partially due to some of the way that I was brought up. And a lot of that has to do with, I was taught to either be the better person, or, to try and be accommodating, or not to cause a lot of fuss, to be cooperative. And these may be things that you're teaching your children, or you've been taught, or you're even practicing right now in your own life. But there has to be a boundary. There has to be a point where you know that there's only so far that goes, in terms of pleasing other people, in terms of being accepted, in terms of not making somebody angry, and those types of things. There has to be a boundary that you recognize. And so often I find that we are not taught those boundaries. We're not teaching them to our children. We might teach them, your private parts are your private parts, and they're not supposed to be touched. And I have noticed, having 4 children of my own, that the education around that from a sexual perspective is starting quite younger. I know that my son, who's in grade 2, recently just had his first bout of education regarding sexual abuse. So I do know that we are creating more awareness around it. But more so than that, what I'm talking about is teaching your children, and yourself for that matter, if for some reason you've not been taught or haven't learned yet, is how to set clear boundaries, and to be able to speak up when something doesn't feel right for you, and to be able to feel okay with that. Oftentimes when we don't do what somebody else wants us to, we feel guilted, we feel bad. They might say something that makes us feel bad. But it's very important for you to follow what feels right to you, because so often what happens when you don't and when you ignore that is it becomes a pattern, it becomes a habit. And before you know it, on a subconscious level, it becomes something that you're doing without even knowing. you're having these Jello-like boundaries that anybody can kind of mold and have you morph into whatever they want, whenever they want, because you no longer know where you end and someone else begins. So it's really important for you to understand what it's like to create boundaries. Boundary setting, as I said, comes from being able to speak up for yourself, letting others know what's good for you. Another big one is being able to say this very powerful, very short, but very powerful word, no. Sometimes we're never taught to say no. We're really taught to be a yes society, to be able to say yes to people, whether it comes to, can you do this for me? We don't want to say no. Will you do this? Sometimes we don't want to say no in different circumstances for fear of the consequence. And sometimes that consequence can be a lack of love or a withdrawal of love. It can be a withdrawal of attention. It can be a withdrawal of, I don't know, financial compensation for work. There's many reasons that we fear saying no, but it's very important for you to learn where your boundaries are and know that for yourself, because once your boundaries are compromised, it's really easy to get into a pattern of doing that over and over again, and that becoming your new norm of not being able to say no, which makes it harder for you to stand up for yourself. Having boundaries for things like friends who are always asking you to just do that one thing for them, those are boundaries. Having people talk down to you or in a way that's negative, abusive, name calling, those are things where you have the right to stand up and say, you know, I don't like it when you speak to me that way. There's got to be another way that you can speak to me, and this just isn't it. So no, you will not speak to me like that anymore. These are the types of things that will help you set boundaries and keep people respectful of what it is to treat you right, the way that it is treating you right for you, defined by you. And so I want to really express that if you are feeling like you're abused, there are places that you can turn to. There are people that you can talk to. I'm one of them, but there are many people like me. There are many professionals out there that can help you. Because once you stand up for yourself, which I myself had to do, it took me quite some time. I had 2 abusers in my life, and for reasons of the social circles that I know them through, I still see them to this day. And one of the things I had to do, I recognized I treated one of them differently than the other. And the one that I still see, I noticed that I would never really, still to this day, up until just very recently, implement my own boundaries and hold them up. And I would allow this person to come and say hello to me because we were in a social setting and I didn't want to cause a rift and I didn't want to make any drama. And, you know, his wife doesn't know what he did. He's moved on in his life. He's got children. And one day it really irked me because I realized that he would just come over and say hi to me and he'd carried on with his life. And the impact of what he had done to me had really been so deep within my own life. It caused distress in my relationships with my parents to start with, because I went through that phase of going through the process after the abuse had happened, after the incident happened, of going through the depression, the fear, the anxiety, and sort of trying to articulate that to my parents without telling them, because it was someone that they knew, knowing that it would cause a lot of trouble to bring this to light. And ultimately with them not wanting to bring it to light once I finally did explain it to them. And it had caused a rift for me as a child with my parents, feeling like I couldn't trust them because I didn't feel like they helped me enforce my boundaries, which for me reinforced that my boundaries were not important. And as I went on, I realized that, this gentleman would come up to me at events, and I was just getting angrier and angrier each time I saw him, because he had just moved on with his life. And I stopped him one day. I asked to meet him out in a parking lot and explained to him that, what you've done, you've kind of gone on with your life and moved on. And I've kept this secret all these years. And I had to face it through my parents. I had to face it with the relationships that I was in terms of my marriages, because having gone through sexual abuse, it can cause issues for you, as it did for me, with trust, with intimacy, and even relating to your partner in a sexual way. So I had to bear and share those gruesome events for me that happened with me to my partners and with my husbands, so that I could have that closeness to them and explain why some of the behaviors and the reactions I may have, where that came from. Whereas I know this fellow, he didn't have to explain any of that. And I also had to pay attention to the fears that surrounded me when my children were born, and having the same thing repeat with them. And I know that he probably didn't have to go through that with his children. And so I mentioned this to him, and I said, I've kept your secret for so long to protect you, and you continue to come around me and say hello. And I just wanted to let you know you really impacted my life in a very negative way, and I've spent my adulthood healing. And I think it's one of the reasons I am a coach, and one of the reasons I do try my very best to help people wherever I can, because I know what it's like to go through incidences where you feel alone, where you feel like no one understands, where you feel like nobody gets you. And it was really important for me to share my experiences and to share the journey that I experienced myself from a healing perspective, to be able to help others, so that maybe in some small way I could ease their pain and ease the difficulties that they were facing. And so he said he didn't know what to say, and basically there was nothing that really came from him. And I knew that the conversation was more for me anyways, because it was me sort of saying, you know what, I'm standing up for myself today, and I'm not your victim anymore. I'm a survivor, and I'm just a woman that you did something to, but I won't let you take that away from me anymore. And oddly enough, I saw him at a wedding recently, and it was just after that event. And I thought that he got it, because it was a 2-day event, and the first day he kind of just walked past me. We were around other people, and he didn't speak to me. But the next day, as law of attraction would have it, I was seated at his table for the reception. He was sitting 2 chairs away from me, and I just froze initially. And he sort of sat there and recognized that other people were going to notice that we weren't conversing. And so he came over to me and he said, "Hello, how are you?" And I didn't answer. And he repeated it again. And I just looked straight ahead and I said, "I'm well, thank you." And he was in shock, I could tell. And I felt as though I had broken that cycle. I felt as though I had finally gotten the strength to be who I always was, to be who I might have been prior to that happening and throughout those years. But in that moment, that was good enough for me, and it began a different chapter, and it has been the beginning to another chapter of my life, and inspires me, as most of my life events do, to share with you, and as many as I can, my experiences, with the hopes that I can help you through your own journey in some way or the other. So I share with you again that if you do feel that you are being abused in some way, if you're unsure, I would really invite you and encourage you to reach out to someone and just find out. At the very best, and if it would be my personal wish for you, is that maybe no, you're not. But in the event that you are, I really encourage you to reach out so that you are not alone, and that you can be supported, and that you can be guided, and that you can receive help in order to have the abuse stop. We are all valuable human beings, every one of us on this planet. We deserve to be loved and treated with respect. So I encourage you, again, if that's something that's going on for you, please do reach out to myself or anybody else that you feel comfortable speaking with that can help you along the way. And with abuse, it's important to know that it's not because of something you've done. I used to think, when I started learning the law of attraction, which is one of the things that guided me to understand it better, was how did I attract this? Why on earth would I attract being victimized in such a way? Generally speaking, though, someone who is abusive will energetically, through your vibration, through your energy, they will feel your lack of confidence. Maybe it's low self-esteem, and they'll be drawn to you. Some people will scope you out, but a lot of times it's as simple as they feel the energy, they feel the lack of confidence within you, that maybe you are one of those pleasers. I believe for me it was because I probably wasn't the one that was going to speak up out of other girls in the circle that probably would have. And so they sense that and they know that about you. And so it's really important for you to be able to know this and to know that you can change that energy. It's not something that you're stuck with if it's happened to you. I had a client on the phone the other day, and she was pretty much determined and had decided that this was the way life was going to be for her. If she was going to be in a relationship, that's what it entailed. It entailed her being victimized. It entailed her being abused, both physically and sexually. And I was so happy to be able to tell her that no, that is not the life that is destined for you. There is something better out there, and there are ways to help you change your energy, change your subconscious messaging, change those things within you that may attract someone that might want to do something like that. I hope that this has been of service to someone, just one person out there. That makes it all worthwhile to me. And I look forward to sharing other experiences with you. I know I can promise you that they will be a little bit more upbeat, some of the more experiences that I will share with you coming forward, but I did want to give this time to this subject as it has been coming across my desk and into my office on a higher frequency lately, and really wanted to speak to it. And also just to share from my own perspective, this is a healing journey for me, and I hope that in some way it will be healing for you. Once again, I always remind you to stop waiting and start living 365.